I got it.
Okay. So the second module started talking about what is trauma. And we did a little bit of that already, but trauma could easily be defined by anything that is overwhelming, unpredictable. And here it threatens the life or physical integrity of a child. It causes an overwhelming sense of terror. We know that helplessness is one of the indications of how significant the trauma will affect a child. The more helpless they feel, the more impact that trauma has on them. Think about that for ourselves. The more helpless we feel, the more it impacts us. All right? Produces intense physical effects. Think about that. When you get scared, what happens to you first? Do what? Heart rate starts going. The adrenaline just floods our system, doesn't it?
Clench up.
Clench up. Well, we constrict out of fear. Same thing we do when we're cold, we constrict. Why is that? What does constriction do? We're bringing ourselves in to survive and to protect. Because if we make ourselves smaller, that's a self-protection strategy. So, okay, an acute trauma is something that is very time-specific. The fires would be that. A car accident. What other things would be an acute trauma? Death of a loved one.
Rape.
A rape. A discrete event is typically an acute trauma, okay? Then we're going to go to chronic. Now, this is the long term. This is, it's repeated over a long time. What would be an example of chronic?
Domestic violence.
Domestic violence. Do what? Okay, domestic violence. What else?
Sexual abuse.
Sexual abuse.
Physical abuse.
Physical abuse. Child abuse. Neglect. Now, one thing that's not always clear is that if you had to identify which things were going to be more difficult and cause more harm to a child, what would you classify, what would you say are the most harmful things to a child? Neglect. Ding, 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 you won. Why is that? Why is neglect the most difficult thing for a child?
You're not even worth being abused. You're not worth being...
I'm not worth being abused. What's happened is I didn't get my needs met. That old attachment cycle, baby cries, caregiver takes care of them, the world is wonderful again, they come back around, they cry, their needs get met, they learn the world is a wonderful place, the butterflies are flying and the birds are singing and they're saying, oh, I'm loved, life is good. If a child cries and doesn't have a need met, what happens? And this happens over and over and over. What happens?
Failure to thrive.
Failure to thrive. So physically, their body doesn't get bigger. They don't eat. Many different things physically. What else?
Lose trust.
They lose trust. They can't trust anyone. So who do they trust? Themselves. We have a budding antisocial personality disorder because they are the only ones who have the consciousness, it's their code right there. That's why they don't have empathy, right? Because I make the rules. Only me is what's important, okay? So when they do that, is there something going on over here?
Just make it hot water.
Oh. So that's one of the biggest things. The other thing that happens with neglect is that holes actually start to develop in the brain. Because the synaptic connections, we have the dendrites of the nerves, and these dendrites come together and they make connections, all right? When there is neglect, these shrivel. And when they shrivel, they don't make those synaptic connections. If they don't make those synaptic connections, kids are not able to go if and then. If I don't do this, then this will happen. Most of you know if I don't go to work or if I don't do what I'm supposed to, there will be consequences, correct? I won't get paid. I'll lose my job. I'll lose my house. If I don't do this, then this will happen. If I don't pay my bills, my electricity will be shut off. That's consequential thinking. That's synaptic connections. So when we tell our kids, you know, if you don't pick up your room, we're not going to be able to go out for dinner tonight. Seems harmless, right? They may not be able to make that consequential if and then connection. So a better way to say is, you know what? I want us all to be able to go out to dinner tonight. Let's go up and work on your room. I made it about relationship and about connection, not about consequences and compliance. We want to connect before we correct. Connect before we correct. Every single time. Touch, connect, then we can shape. Most behavior is not changed because I told somebody to do it. It's changed out of influence and connection and relationship. Right? Didn't you do things because of somebody important in your life? You know, Debbie, you might want to work on this, this, and this. Well, because that's a person I really valued, I did it. Okay? So, we know that with those dendrites being all shriveled, the holes create the spaces in between them. So the brain is also use dependent. So to give you an example, in May, my dad had a stroke. And I made an emergency trip back to Kansas City. He had a stroke in the brainstem. The brainstem affects the optic nerve. So his vision is double. He sees double with everything. So he says, well, I'm just going to wait till it gets better, and you know, I want to be able to go to the Lake of the Ozarks by 4th of July, and I want to drive my car and everything. He's not putting together that those brain cells are what? They're dead. That's what happens in a stroke. The brain cells are dead and they close off. So he went and saw an optical neurologist last Friday. And the optical neurologist, or whatever they call it, I'm probably not using the right words, said, we think that there's the opportunity for for the brain to repair itself and create new neural pathways to bypass those dead ones and compensate for the dead ones. Okay, does that make sense? So he's going to have double vision for quite a while. In the meantime, though, the brain's working hard to forge new pathways to give his vision what it needs to be, all right? Same thing with our kids. Our brain is use dependent. So how many of you have ridden a bike in the last 6 months? Okay, let's pretend nobody has, because it works better for this illustration. All right, if I were to bring bikes in here right now, could you get on them and ride them down the street? Right, okay. Because our brain is use dependent, it might be a little rusty. You might start out going, whoa, but as we use it, our brain, it increases. So when we don't, so how many of you could explain to me the major concepts of geometry right now? Anybody? Pythagorean theorem. What is it? Come on. A squared plus?
B squared plus B squared is C
C squared. But we haven't used it, have we? Anybody used geometry in the last year? Well, good. You're building a house. Good point. So we don't use it, so it's rusty. It goes away. We don't have it at our access, correct? That's what the brain does. It's use dependent. So our kids, because of these holes, we have to help them develop new neural pathway and new synaptic connections. That's the beauty. The brain has the plasticity to recreate and heal itself. Who knows what mirror neurons are? What are they?
We just did this last time. The mirror neurons are this patterning. When you see
That's
something
right,
else,
that's right.
I have neurons that form to reflect what I'm seeing.
So what do, gaga, when we have little babies and we sit there, what do we try to get them to do?
Smile.
Oh, we go to great lengths, don't we? You know, we're just gaga over ourselves. I see that coming. Mirror neurons. Then that baby starts mimicking our facial expressions, right? So that's basically what we're going to do with our children. So our child gets dysregulated, and I'm going to start going lower, slower, softer. I'm going to start breathing slow. so that and it's amazing how they start to mirror that. Some of my private clients, I will find that my most effective when I synchronize my breathing with theirs. They don't know I'm doing it. I just start doing it, and pretty soon I see the calmness and stuff starts coming out because they feel safe and we're in synchronicity. There's mirror neurons there. How many of you, and many of you have already done that today, when I look at you, start nodding your head. I'm nodding my head, I look at you, you're nodding your head. Mirror neurons, okay? It's very, see, she just, yeah, see, yeah, thank you, I appreciate that, because that means you're not in the disassociative continuum. That means you're here with me, and I appreciate that. You're present, thank you, I need that. So, it's very important for us to understand how important our body language is. And because I'm so animated and so gesturing, when I work with the family, I really have to pull things down and just try to be present, try to be calm and make it about them and listening. And I do a lot of the head nodding, yeah. And giving my calm to them, okay? Those mirror neurons are powerful. You know, it's so fun to watch little kids and how they'll mimic you. You know, all you have to do, they may be nonverbal, and you start winking or doing something, and pretty soon, I had one of my grandkids, you know, I was doing something, we were all dancing, and I think they were just little teeny tiny, and they were all dead, and I'm doing it, pretty soon, they're trying to snap their fingers. Have no clue what they're doing, but you see them, you know, it's so funny. They want to mirror. So if we can mirror regulation and affect regulation, we stand a better chance of regulating that. Okay? That's the value of that. So that's chronic. So we talked about this. What about neglect? It's perceived by trauma as trauma. The term, it's all right, we can go on. Complex trauma decides a specific kind of chronic trauma. Okay? Multiple traumatic events. So complex trauma, and oftentimes we'll see this child has a complex trauma history, and it might be because they had so much happen to them at a young age. So it could be that there was incidents of sexual abuse and they were moved around, and then they went to live with grandmother, and then grandmother got ill and went into the hospital, and so then they went and lived with an auntie, and then auntie's husband was arrested and taken out of the home, and they were moved because there was drugs, and then they were put into a foster home, and then that foster home disrupted, and then they went into a home that, you know, was adopted. These are real life stories, and that's complex trauma. There's so much that it's really hard to just say, oh, well, they had sexual abuse in their history. Rarely do we see a child where we could say, oh, this was their trauma. It's usually very, very complex, and the dynamics are about relationships. You know, trauma happens in the context of relationship. Where will it be healed? In the context of relationships. Brandy, right on. Woo! Score one for the home team here. So excellent. I'm glad that you can pull that up too. So use dependent. The more, one of the other trainings that I do is called the 12 Brain Rules. If you haven't read the book Brain Rules by John Medina, it's excellent. And it's very, very simple about working with families. Two of the rules are, I just got back from Romania 2 weeks ago, and we taught the Romanian parents this, and they just loved it. But two of the rules are repeat to remember and remember to repeat. That's how our brain works. It's like, oh no, that's good. Very, very simple. But if I said twinkle, twinkle, little,
Star.
how'd you learn that?
My son sang it to me yesterday.
He sang it to you yesterday because we heard it over and over and over when we were a child, correct? Or how did you learn your ABCs? Because someone sang it to you
Over.
to ad nauseum, right? You're like, seriously? You know, and it's so cute to see any little, I know my ABCs. You're like, okay, that's okay, we'll do it. So, or your multiplication tables. Some of us still don't know them, but do you remember practicing 9 times 7, 4 times 5? You know, over and over and over we did those. So, complex trauma is caused by adults who should have been protecting. One of the things that I work with parents to help understand is when that child was little, they had a bucket. And that bucket should have been filled with preciousness. They should have been made to feel that they were special. And that bucket never got filled. And so that child is going around in life trying to get that bucket filled. And that's where they're needy, that's where they're aggressive, that's where they act out, That's where they do a lot of different things. It's their effort to get that bucket filled. And so then we react to them and basically saying, you're not really worth it, doesn't matter. You know, get over it. Nail it shut and move on. Can we do that? Only if we mourn that loss and then move to another adaptive process. But that would be a higher order learning process that maybe would take place later on in a child's life. Okay, we're going to, there you go. How children respond to trauma. Long-term trauma can interfere with healthy development. We also know that a child's physical development may be impaired by their trauma. They may be smaller. We see children, have you seen children walking around on their toes? They walk on the balls of their feet. Well, they may not have had the developmental pieces as a child where they learned and somebody helped them balance and do their walking. We also see them that they might be clumsy. See a lot of accident-prone children. Well, could that be because some of their developmental stages were thwarted or shorted? They didn't actually get some of those things completed? Their ability to trust others is impaired. Their sense of personal safety. Their ability to manage their emotions. They go from here to here in seconds, right? Haven't we seen it? So, this is one of the things we talked about at the staffing yesterday. So there is a little bit of space right there. How can we help them capture and maybe breathe in that emotion so that they don't have to go up all the way there? So it's ability to navigate, so they're not flexible. They want things orderly and predictable, and we did that this way yesterday. That's the way we should do it, like, for the next 9 years. Don't change on me. Don't change anything. Don't change the paint colors. Don't move the furniture. Don't take a different route to school. Have you seen that with kids? Don't make any changes. Have you seen that with its daughter that you adopted? Have you seen that? Does she want things predictable and the same? Yes. Okay. We also see one family that I worked with, the daughter would rearrange stuff in the house. You know, it was her way of just bringing order. She consistently had to do that. So they want things predictable, they want control. So giving them options. Now, people go, well, I give them as many choices. The choices may be overwhelming to them. So what we can say is, we're going to leave in just a few minutes. Do you want me to help you pack your backpack, or can you get it yourself? Okay, so I predicted what was going to happen, when it was going to happen, but I let them maybe take care of their backpack. So I gave them a sense of control, but I started predicting things. We know that transitions are the most difficult things. Getting up in the morning, transition. Going to bed at night, transition. Where do we have a lot of our behaviors with kids? In the morning, at night, right? Those are transitions. So what are ways that we can ease those transitions? What are ways that we can put those together? Going to school, coming home from school. Big transitions. And it's usually a time we're trying to fix dinner, we're hectic, we may be at our low energy. So what can we do to help that time, that 3 to 4, 2 to 4, whatever that time is? So having an activity, having sensory things, timing those children in, bringing them into our sphere, connecting with them, telling them how much we miss them, how valuable they are to us, forming that connection again, forming it. They were away from us. Bringing them back. You're special, I'm glad you're here. Speaking to their spirit, giving them that information. So physical and emotional responses to stress. This is where they can have nightmares. We can start to see stomach. We can see somatic issues, headaches, a lot of stomach issues. We see a lot of stomach issues. I'm a big fan of looking at metaphors. What's a child that's having stomach issues? What might that be about? What metaphor could that be? Thoughts? I can't stomach all this stuff. I just can't stomach it. It's too much. It's upset me. It upset my stomach. So if I had a kid that had stomach issues, I'd be looking at, what are they so overwhelmed about? What's going on? How can we slow things down? And sometimes our lives are too busy and we think we're doing kids a favor. They're in this. They're going to camp, we got them in violin lessons, we're going to, we're doing gymnastics, because all these things are good for them. When really, we need to just contain it and slow it down. They need it slow, they need it predictable. They need you. That's what they need. Go ahead. So a child's reactions will varied depending on what age it started, right?